And my final story for today, there was a motion filed by the extremely extraordinary attorney, Sidney Powell, on behalf of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. We talked last week about Sidney Powell having filed this motion to compel, and she laid out for the judge all the documents that were withheld by the prosecution, which is by our federal government, by the Department of Justice and the FBI, withheld in their prosecution of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. There's a rule, which we talked about before, the Brady Rule. The Brady Rule, longstanding federal law, basically says if you're the prosecutor, you must turn over all documents to the lawyer for the person you're prosecuting. You must turn over all potentially exculpatory evidence, all evidence to help the person being prosecuted to defend himself. Sidney Powell is pointing out that the attorneys in our own U.S. attorney, our own prosecutors, our federal government, going after Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, withheld, and she lists, I think it's about 40 items, Brady evidence they were forced, they were required by law to turn over, but did not. So she's making her case now in front of Judge Emmett Sullivan so what is the big news of today is that list of things was released. And I put on my website, AmericaCanWeTalk.org, there's an article by the extremely brilliant Sarah Carter, one of the last remaining true investigative journalists in America. Sarah Carter she explained what I just said to you. She talked about Sidney Powell trying to force this judge to look at the evidence that should have been provided to the accused, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, that the prosecution was required by law to turn over but did not. And Sidney Powell, has not yet made the argument that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn should be allowed to withdraw his guilty plea. That's where a lot of people thought she was headed with this. But instead, she is basically putting on record in front of Judge Emmett Sullivan to say, this is unlikely that this guilty plea would have ever been made had the prosecutors followed the law and turned over the evidence they were required to turn over. She's getting at, I'm going to guess, she wants Sullivan to throw out the whole prosecution, to say, you know what, there's such extreme prosecutorial misconduct in this case, egregious, extreme, prejudicial wrongdoing by the prosecutor in this case, that the whole thing should be thrown out. This is where I think she's angling toward. But I want you to encourage you to go to our website, AmericaCanWeTalk.org, because she, in this listing of the many things that she's saying the court needs to rule that the prosecution should have turned over under the Brady Rule but did not, she lists many specific things. What it helps you understand, it gives you a window into the breadth and scope and depth of tenacity and determination by this federal prosecutor, Mueller, and his team to simply get Michael Flynn. That's what it makes clear, that these people were so unwilling to follow the law, so uninterested in truth, which is supposed to be what you seek as a prosecutor. You seek to find truth, not seek to get a conviction. You seek to find truth. But these people were so determined to bring down Michael Flynn because what they were really determined to do was to bring down the President of the United States. This, my friends, when people say this was a coup inside the DOJ and the FBI, and you hear lots of people saying, well, that's pretty strong language. When you see what they withheld, their entire intent was obviously to make it impossible for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn to present a legitimate defense. They wanted to get him. They thought by getting him, they might eventually turn him and get him to testify against President Trump. And it didn't work. And they're livid that it did not work. Now, Flynn did cooperate with them in some things. The deal they have right now was the prosecutor isn't seeking jail time in exchange for Flynn doing some cooperation. Flynn's done cooperating. Prosecutors now hinting, maybe after all, he's not cooperating anymore, so maybe we'll go for jail time. I think Sidney Powell is really kind of putting at the feet of this federal judge saying, are you going to let this Mueller team, this FBI and Department of Justice, simply obliterate the rule of law? Are you going to let them get away with this obvious coup attempt to deprive this accused person, this defendant, of his right to have the evidence he has the right to, are you going to let that stand or not? And I don't know what Judge Sullivan will do. I think the next hearing is September 24th. But Judge Sullivan is now seeing the breadth of wrongdoing inside the DOJ and the FBI. This just visceral determination, we're going to destroy this man. Some of the language and some of the documents she is seeking is pretty colorful, so I will let you read that. But I want to urge you, the other little last legal point before I get to why it matters to you is this. One choice Emmett Sullivan has is to say, you know what, we're throwing out this entire prosecution, we're done. The other one he had, because I don't think that the FBI and the DOJ, I don't think they want to turn over this evidence. They don't think they should have to. They don't think they should have to. They want to say, hey, we got a conviction. This is nothing, he pled guilty. Everyone knows he's guilty. You don't need to worry about this evidence. But Judge Sullivan actually has as an option to compel the turning over of all of this evidence she is seeking. I think it's 40 documents. Judge Sullivan could force a turnover of those documents by the government to the Flynn team, but to Sidney Powell. And if they won't do that, this judge could hold them in contempt. He could literally march these prosecutors off to jail to say, you can sit there for a while and think about how strongly you feel about protecting what the FBI's wrongdoing. Is it worth your career? Is it worth you sitting in jail? Because, folks, this is, at the end of the day, this gets around to the idea, do we have a rule of law or not? This is very, very serious, high-stakes stuff. It's not just about one guy, Michael Flynn, who was egregiously wronged. It's about the higher idea. Did we, because of this witch hunt was too nice of a word, this coup attempt, this frame up against President Trump inside our own federal government, do we have the backbone, the determination, the willingness to take it all the way to holding the wrongdoers accountable? Apparently, by the way, Devin Nunes said in an interview recently that he wants to see the prosecution go to the highest level of the, in his term, mastermind of the Trump-Russia frame-up, the Trump-Russia coup. And I'm going to guess, this is not what Nunes said, my guess he's talking about John Brennan, head of the CIA, who needs to be held accountable for his wrongdoing.